Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give it just a few seconds here for the numbers to settle down on folks entering the call, and then we'll kick off our session today. Let's see, looks like it's settled down, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome again to Colorado Broadband Office BEAD Open Office Hours. Today's session, we'll be discussing a high-level overview of Build America, Buy America. Uh, just know we would welcome your questions. Please put them in the chat, but we may defer the answers to those questions to our second session of BABA scheduled for mid-March. We will try to field as many questions as we can, but just know we're going to probably defer a lot of the details questions. So when we get into the details in mid-March. One thing that I'd like to do before I turn it over to our BABA experts, hopefully they don't mind me calling them BABA experts today, is we had been notified that we had a discrepancy in our guidelines versus our last FAQ on letter of credit. We were notified that it looked like we had a discrepancy in the total amount, and we did find that, correct it. It's in FAQ 6.1. And the discrepancy was it is a letter of credit is 10% of the sub a grant award, not the total project amount. So we did correct that and we have that updated. And then one last thing, network design attributes. We gave a template for that and we recognized after a couple of questions came in that we didn't have all the attributes on there. Somehow it lost some of the attributes. So if you've downloaded the network design attributes from our website, please go there again. There is a new attributes file that has what we believe to be all the attributes, all the way from path layer, all the way to the location side. So hopefully that will get you guys updated and it didn't cause too much headache for you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Naveed, and he's going to kick us off and describe an overview of our BABA process and what you should be looking for. Naveed?
That's right. Thank you, Michael. And good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. Just to reiterate his earlier point, this is going to be part one of two sessions. So our goal here today is to give you an overview of the BABA requirements. We won't be going into detailed questions, but please put them in the chat regardless. We're going to use them as incorporation for our detailed training in next month. So my name is Naveed Kashani. I'm here with the KPMG to give you that overview. Let me introduce myself, and then I'll give Anthony a second to introduce himself as well. Started my career doing audits within Big Four, and then progressed to go get my law degree in Par Passage in Maryland before returning to consulting KPMG, where I've spent the last 6 years within our government contractor services team, based out of Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. My team in particular works on a variety of government regulations like the FAR, the CAS, all those fun acronyms that everybody loves to fall asleep to reading. But over the last few years, more specifically 2 CFR 200 and some of those domestic content regulations that we've been helping out state agencies and other commercial clients with. But I'll let Anthony introduce himself real quick as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Naveed. Hey, everyone. Anthony Amato, manager with KPMG out of New York City. Been with the firm for about 7 years. I'm a CPA and CFE by background, primarily focused on grants management, oversight, compliance, and reporting. Really, on the past 5 years, been focused with broadband. I'm supporting a number of states, so very familiar with SLFRF, CPF, BEAD, and looking forward to speaking with you all. Thank you.
And so just taking a look at this agenda, just to walk you through it really quickly, we're going to start off with an overview of BABA and some of the justifications behind it, as well as its scope, before we go into what you're probably interested in, which is the compliance overview and the types of requirements for the iron and steel manufactured products and construction materials. Then I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Anthony to talk through some of the NTIA, BEAD, flavoring, things to consider from a risk and readiness perspective, and then waivers before we wrap it up with key takeaways. So we can go on to our next slide here. So as many of you are probably well aware at this point dealing with IJA and BABA, it comes from the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, otherwise known as IJA. I'll save you some time as for how it all came to be and kind of focus on the big hits. The incentive here was to strengthen the domestic manufacturing push that we've seen throughout this and the prior administration. Specifically, BABA applies to federal infrastructure projects and promotes the use of domestic materials and products, things like iron and steel, manufactured products, and construction materials. Now, if you're anything like me, you might be thinking, why do we have to comply with this? This is a big pain in the butt, put it frankly, but really comes down to, well, the United States government is probably one of the biggest purchasers of goods in the world, with about half of those purchases going to manufactured products. And throughout the last few years, governments wanted to incentivize the domestic supply chain to prioritize the use of domestically produced goods and reduce the dependence on foreign materials where they can. And so this has been prioritized through policies pretty heavily through my time at KPMG. I'm sure you guys have heard of Buy American Act, Buy America Act. There's a lot of different domestic regs out there, but my takeaway to you is that they are all pushing the same thing, which is the purchase of goods, products, and materials within the United States. But bringing it back to BABA, just keep in mind, it doesn't always apply to every project, but it does apply to you here, and it's important to understand and comply with it. So kind of from an informal knowledge check perspective, we have a question for you at the bottom here. You don't need to answer it. Nobody's on the spot. But, when should you start to think about BABA applicability? Well, the answer is, if not now, back when you started. So you're on the right path. This is where you want to be. Just keeping these things in mind as you start to go through your procurement process. So let's go on to our next slide. Thank you. Quick summary, IJA creates BABA, you're subject to it. What does that actually mean? So the actual requirement from BABA is that no funds for a federal financial assistance program for infrastructure can be obligated for a project unless all of the iron and steel, the manufacturing products, and the construction materials used in the project are produced within the United States, right? So think of this as like 3 buckets of tests, and they each have their own specific instructions and guidance associated with them. Start with iron and steel, which is on the bottom left of the slide. What's considered iron and steel is any articles or materials or supplies that consist wholly or predominantly of iron and steel, or some sort of combination of the both. Nice little legal definition that's a lot of fun. But the test itself is the entire manufacturing process from the initial melting stage through coating needs to occur within the United States for it to be considered produced within the United States. Manufactured products is probably what most people are interested in. It's at the top there. I could give you the legal definition for what a manufactured product is, and talks about articles and materials and supplies that have been processed in a specific form and shape, et cetera, et cetera. But what I really want you to take away from that conversation is that when you think about a manufactured product, it needs to be something more involved than simple assembly. It has to be some sort of transformative element to it from the parts and supplies and components that you're pulling together. Colloquially speaking, anecdotally speaking, I've seen clients who have tried to say, we pull a kit in and, it's actually, these are just components. We're putting them together. That's manufacturing then. But, even if you're buying a kit and assembling it, the government's seen this, they don't buy it. It really comes down to where is the meaningful transformation in that process, right? So what's the test? First, it needs to be manufactured in the United States. If it's not being manufactured in the United States, don't even worry about the cost of components test, because that's kind of the first bar to get through. The second piece, and what you've probably heard of, is that when you look at your cost of components. So the cost of the components for that manufactured product need to exceed 55% domestic cost. Now, I want to pause there and say, in this case, it's 55%, but let's say you're working with another agency down the line. If there's another more stringent requirement under BABA for that agency, that takes precedence. So think of the 55% as a floor, not a ceiling. Going on to construction materials. So for construction materials, your requirement is that all your manufacturing processes need to occur within the United States. There is a lot of different materials that are highlighted in the regulations. You can find that in 2 CFR Part 184. they have their associated specific tests in there as well. But I think that's a good overview of what you're going to expect. There's 3 different buckets that you need to be ready to address. And I'm going to pass it on to Anthony now to start to talk about some of the NTIA BEAD specific considerations.
Perfect. Thank you, Naveed.
Mm-hmm.
Think next slide. Perfect. So here's just like a high level overview of the actual NTIA BEAD considerations regarding the program. Starting first with Colorado and CBO as the eligible entity receiving BEAD funds. First and foremost, Colorado is tasked with ensuring that all of their grantees and projects comply with BABA. This will primarily be done through oversight and monitoring efforts through desktop reviews, site visits, and reporting mechanisms. A lot of you are probably going through those on your other broadband programs, and they'll be adding procedures to do that for BEAD. Also, the Buy America preference, it's included in all RFPs, documents, contracting documents, proposals, agreements, sub-agreements. I'm sure you've seen it kind of since BEAD inception when it was in all the BEAD no-phone documents and flowed down to provisions within all of your contracting documents with CBO. At the subrecipient level, you all for your different project teams want to call this out, but as grantees, you are primarily responsible for determining whether a project is subject to the Buy America preference. So you guys are really the first line of defense on all of your projects. What that means for you all is you should be ensuring that products delivered to your project sites properly document BABA compliance. I know there's probably a lot of questions regarding documentation, and that larger training later on next month, we'll be getting into that in a lot more detail, but kind of just want to give a high level overview right now of what's required. Really what this means for compliance is the NTIA has put forth, as of right now, a high level framework. So first and foremost, there's a self-certification. This is on Commerce's website and allows manufacturers to certify that their products are produced domestically and meet BABA requirements. There's also a certification letter, which you should all be collecting from any manufacturers that you're dealing with on your projects, certifying compliance with those domestic content requirements. Again, that certification that you're getting with a lot of the manufacturers is that first line of defense. It's what NTIA has let us know right now on what they'll be looking for. But again, in that later training, we're getting into more detail how you can support that certification with supporting documentation. Next slide. Here we just want to get into some risk and readiness considerations in terms of potentially not being compliant with BABA and what that can mean. There's certainly different financial, programmatic, legal, regulatory, and reputational risks that you could have to deal with if you're found to be non-compliant. Obviously, the first one, disallowed costs or potential clawbacks. If you're found to be non-compliant, losing grant funds or potentially having funds deobligated on your project and not being able to complete the project, should that occur. Programmatically, it could delay your project. You could be put on enhanced corrective action plans, more severe suspension of work, or it could also affect future grant programs which you're eligible for. If you have compliance audit findings, compliance findings, or things of that nature, that could, potentially ding you in terms of trying to get funds for other broadband projects or other infrastructure related projects down the road. Also, from a legal perspective, you could have potential single audit findings, enhanced legal enforcement actions, and again, heightened oversight and monitoring from CBO or other entities if there is BABA noncompliance found. Also, from a reputational perspective, just public findings, reduce stakeholder trust, and with the CBO, other partner peers and stakeholders that you're working with on your projects, and again, impacting future partnerships and program funding. With that, I'll turn it back over to Naveed real quick to kind of talk through some considerations for enhanced BABA compliance and building out a compliance program for BABA.
Thanks, Anthony. I mean, obviously risks are a major consideration for anyone dealing with grants funding. But, myself personally, when it comes to the carrot or the stick, I think I probably prefer the carrot. And so what I also want to get across in our messaging here is that going down this pathway of BABA compliance is actually going to set yourself up for success as well. Building out this program is a very strategic move in this space right now. As I've mentioned, we've seen domestic content regs as a whole growing in priority. And we can probably reasonably anticipate that there's going to be even more stringent regulations as time goes on. For example, like the Buy American Act has increased its threshold requirements over the years, right? So what does this mean for you? Well, you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace by building out your program. So that can result in a competitive advantage, against maybe some of your peers, or create more opportunity, um, allow you the opportunity to compete for more business that's being funded by federal and state and local financial assistance, right? And then as these types of requirements continue to flow down through various other future grants, you can have potentially, you're ready to go to market with a BABA compliance program. You can have potentially the expectation of increased demand over time as well. But let me give it back to Anthony to talk through some of those documentation requirements as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Naveed. I think kind of what Naveed said earlier, now is kind of the right time to start getting ahead of it, right? Really, the first thing you can do is kind of assign a BABA compliance lead for your organization or your respective project teams receiving BEAD grants. Having someone who's knowledgeable, has read the BABA regulations, and kind of communicate those throughout the organization is definitely, first and foremost, important to kind of have someone with that skill set and knowledge base. Also, just evaluating overall risk in your overall procurement process, understanding any potential gaps to come into compliance with BABA, to help implement those now prior to issuing subcontracts or awards for goods and materials. Then just overall from a procurement and contracting perspective, making sure any of your bids and your bid evaluation criteria include domestic preference criteria will be important. That's something the feds will be looking for from an audit readiness perspective. Also, just again, contract clauses and flowdowns to any second tier subrecipients or contractors and subcontractors. Again, you'll see these requirements in your own grant agreement with CBO, but ensuring that those flow down to the contracts which you all are issuing as well is very important also. And then lastly, just I know we mentioned that certification earlier, but that really is the first line of defense in terms of what the NTIA will be looking for, making sure you get that with all of your manufacturers, have them designated by the respective categories, which Naveed went through. And then again, in the next training, we'll go through kind of the supporting documentation to support those certifications. Next slide. One item we just wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that waivers are available and do exist. However, they are unlikely, so do not bank on them, right? In general, the Department of Commerce, they have the authority to issue BABA waivers for 3 reasons: public interest, non-availability, and unreasonable cost. Again, we'll get into these in more detail, but just want to make you aware of them in case there is an extreme circumstance where you might apply for a waiver and need one. As it relates to the overall BEAD program, they have issued a non-availability waiver with respect to certain goods and materials, understanding that it's highly likely they'll be available to support the entire BEAD program. You'll see that on the Department of Commerce's website as it relates to non-optic glass inputs and electronics and BEAD programs with some exceptions. We'll share some resources when sending out this deck where you can kind of see this as well on DOC's website. Just more broadly wanted to make you aware that this exists. But again, the best step is to kind of get ahead of it, build out a compliance program, and if there is an extreme situation where you might apply or qualify for a waiver, to reach out. I think with that, next slide.
Yep. So what does this mean in the grand scheme of things, right? This slide here encapsulates our conversation thus far, and I don't really kind of want to belabor the point and reiterate verbatim some of the stuff that we've said. So I want you to think of this slide as like a "what do I do now?" A slide, right? So looking at the first bullet, when it comes to internal resources and legal counsel, really comes down to one: do you have legal counsel? If so, great. Use them. That's what they're there for. Have them review your regulatory requirements. Have them review BABA, your existing contracts, and your flow down clauses. If you don't, that's fine too. I think as an attorney, my first recommendation is always going to be contact your attorney, right? Which everyone hates to hear, but it is what it is. But you should still be reading BABA, making sure you understand it. NTIA has put out a lot of fantastic guidance and summaries, and attend all the trainings that you can, like our future one coming next month. Shameless plug there. Our second slide, or second bullet, updating your procurement process as soon as possible. So engage your suppliers. That's going to be very important. And remember, it's Colorado's responsibility to monitor y'all, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you comply which means that it's your responsibility to review your subcontractors, your vendors, your subrecipients, et cetera. So make sure that you're flowing down your requirements, make sure that your solicitation and bid evaluations are being updated to account for these BABA compliance requirements. Check your vendors, right? Evaluate your procurement process and see, are they on the white list of self-certified manufacturers? If so, that's fantastic. If not, consider talking to them, see if that they can go ahead and do that. And if not, maybe start to look for vendors who are able to certify it. Also, communicate with your vendors to make sure they're ready to fill out those supplier certification letters once your procurement processes kick off, so that it's not a surprise to them or you. Third, determining who's responsible for BABA compliance. So, this is coming. Make sure you have a lead in place to manage the regulation. Subsequently, let's also make sure that you have a plan of attack for who's responsible for maintaining and storing those certification letters and other audit-ready documentation. And then, last but not least, on the waiver strategy side. So Anthony just gave a really great overview. There is an existing public non-availability waiver out there from NTIA. It's important that you understand it, see if it applies to you. We'll have a link to the hub page in the deck that'll be distributed after the call. But I think if there's one thing I want to get across to you is that realize that the waivers are hard to get and they're limited in nature and scope. And what we're seeing is that the administration wants to push for more domestic content, not less. So with that being said, I want to take a second there and thank you everyone for their time. We know it's a lot of information. We really look forward to meeting everyone in our more involved conversation and training next month to discuss these requirements in a lot more detail. But remember, if you have any questions, maybe they didn't pop up during this call, send them out to the Colorado team and we'll make sure that we kind of incorporate them within our training as well.
Thank you, Naveed, Anthony. I think there's one question that maybe we could get a little bit of information on. Steve asked, can you also discuss the de minimis waiver? I don't remember hearing that in there, but maybe that's something that is associated with BABA, maybe?
There is a de minimis waiver. I'd like to, in the interest of not super, I hate to say minimizing, but like overstating the waiver. I'd rather go into it a little bit more conversation when we talk about non-availability and all those other things. So yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Naveed. That's my bad because I'm not familiar with the de minimis waiver, so I didn't know how big of a topic that would be. So we'll hold that, and that'll be part of our conversation the next time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, like we said, we welcome your questions. We'll capture them, and then we will give further details on the next BABA session if it's BABA related. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, we can try to field those as well. Craig, you have your hand up?
Yeah, one for Naveed.
Yep.
When you look at the current non-availability waiver expiring in roughly 3 years from this month, but yet we're allowed a 4-year period of performance, does that require a re-upping of a non-availability waiver in year 3? Or otherwise, if you spend money on stuff that's not waived, like electronics in year 4, it's just not covered or reimbursed?
I think the important takeaway there is that there is a gap, right? So trying to account for that, but then also working with your manufacturers and working with your waiver request process with NTIA to make sure that they will see a demand if this continues into year 4. I think they anticipate like by that point that you're already procuring domestic and it's not difficult to obtain these things, but communicating from an industry perspective, making sure that that's still noting that it's not the case, right? And so I would plan to account for that gap. I mean, I know that I just kind of gave you a whole word sandwich there, but does that kind of make sense?
Well, the whole reason for the electronics part of the non-availability was the semiconductor supply chain just is not in place and would not be in place for 5 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Because it took 30 years to offshore it, it won't reshore in 5 years. And so even though you can have substantive transformation of an OLT in the U.S., you cannot have the cost of the electronics, basically the chipsets that are on those boards, be made in America. And that was the problem and what drove that. And that's not going to be solved in 3 years, much less 5. And so someone would need to close the gap on that year 4. If our awards start in April in Colorado and you have a 4-year build, or you just finish up your build in the next, just under 3 years. Or just plan to eat the cost of the electronics.
Yeah, and let me, on our end, we have some contact. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig, thanks so much for bringing that up. You always bring up the best things. So we'll take that back to NTIA for conversation. If they're not thinking about it, we'll make sure that they are. But also, as a reminder, those waivers come from NTIA, and sometimes y'all ISPs have even more influence than the states do. So we encourage you to bring that up with NTIA, either through your associations or individually as well. We'll take it back. Thanks, Craig.
Yep. A couple of questions have come in. Kate, you have your hand up, and I'm assuming it's based on the questions you typed in.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
I didn't want to miss it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to double check. So we had finished our network design for the PE certification, and the attributes, I think we have all of the data that you're requesting, right? But
Okay.
I think you said last week we have to have it like exactly with the names, exactly how you have them and the way you have it laid out. Is that right? We need to have it. I need to like update it and send it back to them.
If they've already certified it, let's look at it and have a conversation, please. I don't want you to have to redo it because that has an expense with it, but that is just not something that we want to force. But if you have the information and you have path layer attributes and it dramatically mimics, maybe not naming, but it dramatically mimics what we've been requested in our attributes that we've updated, then I think we might be okay, Kate. But let's schedule some time with me and we'll just take a look at it real quick.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, Laura, you had a couple questions here. Let's see. For the phase milestone template, this is part of the PE certification package. Will there be flexibility on the time frame for interim milestones? Could you come offline and just give me a little bit more background before I put my foot in my mouth?
Yeah, so on the template that was provided, I don't believe it's final yet. We just wanted to make sure that we're not going to be set in stone here with these
Yeah,
timelines that
okay.
we provide. And, if they're off by a couple of months,
Yeah.
how much flexibility will there be
Yeah.
there?
Substantively, this is just a point in time snapshot of what the plan is. And we would expect that possibly due to NEPA or other incidences, whether it be a permitting, anything like that, may delay some of these milestones that you've given us. So there will be flexibility. If it's significant, though, if it's more than, a few months or something like that, let's have a conversation at the grant management level. We may want to do a modification and think, to kind of consider if it's going to be a significant impact to the timeline.
Okay,
Yeah, and
so
can I
just contact you all as issues may arise or timeframe shift, and we expect them to take a little bit longer than planned.
Yeah. Yeah, just that's where I would say the grant management communications, whoever your grant manager that's assigned to this to your application or to your grant, that's where those conversations come in real handy. That's what we're looking for in the monthly reports as well. If you think something's going to impact it, let's talk about it early and let's make sure that we understand it and have run all the avenues to prevent it from impacting you.
And Laura, if I can add just one more thought here. we certainly understand that best laid plans change in a
Yeah.
construction project. And so that was really what Michael's talking about here is just maintaining communication with your grant managers so that we are apprised of any changes. That's a little bit different than if you have created a timeline, you send it over to your engineer, and the engineer's like, there's no way you're going to get this done in 6 months. It's a project that's going to take you 3 years. In that case, we would just want you to revise that timeline. And if you need to reach out to us and we need to update Salesforce, we need to update your deliverables, it's not a problem. We want it
Yeah.
to be accurate. But that's what the NTIA is trying to get at with this timeline check. They just want a second set of eyes. That's not us, it's not y'all, that says, yeah, I'm an expert in this field, even though y'all are also experts, right? And I believe reasonably that this project could be done in this amount of time. So just a little bit of a distinction there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And then your second question for the communications with CDOT, how should we show proof of communications? We've had this question, and my answer to that question was, we're not looking for you to, as part of your engineering package, to give us any CDOT communications. That would be included in your permitting milestone, and just some communication, something proving or showing communications, whether you're asking for an MSA or if you're doing the regular permit process. That's what we would be looking for.
And I will add to that, just because it's coincidental and I'm able to do it. CDOT will be our presenter next week. So would I know they will be happy to take any additional questions that you have about their process. And if we haven't mentioned it, because I hopped on a little bit late, we've got CDOT coming next week. We've got NEPA and historic preservation, 2 more in-depth sessions the next 2 weeks after that, and then we'll be getting back to BABA after that. So when you're thinking about who you'd like to invite to the office hours, you may find that if you've already got your environmental and historic preservation consultants on board, they may really find even the CDOT, but certainly the next 2 weeks real helpful. Maybe your construction or admin people maybe may find the next week's also relatively helpful. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hadn't mentioned the CDOT yet, Allie. I was going to close the meeting with that. Our next one was CDOT.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It should have been brought up in the beginning as well. And you were speaking, Laura, when I just started trampling all over you. What was your comment?
That's okay. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question because the CDOT communication is part of our onboarding checklist. And so we were under the impression that that was due this coming Monday. Is that not the case?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not the case. What we want to know, or what the timing on that would be after all of the certification from the PE and everything on Monday, if you had the Monday date, or if it is a later date, whatever that date was.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I am understanding the question accurately. There are 2 parts of what if you have a CDOT, if you're going to be working in CDOT right of way. I think initially for the upcoming deadline, we had said just proof of communicating to CDOT that you will have a project in there, but not a permit. So you don't need a permit. You don't need to have submitted anything to CDOT
Okay.
at that point. That's a milestone that will come further on in the project. Michael, I think that's, check me if I'm wrong, but I think that may be what we had put into that onboarding.
Okay.
I think so.
Let me go look at it because maybe I'm misstating
And in that case, Laura, it is simply the email that you sent.
Okay. And if we wanted to get feedback on that before we provide it to CDOT, is that something that you all would be willing to take a look at? to make sure, that it includes all of the information that's needed. We have previously had some trouble getting a hold of CDOT. So I just want to make sure that we keep things rolling.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the intent of what this is, and this may be helpful for you in terms of figuring this out. So one of the things that we recognize that's coming for CDOT is sort of a bump in permits. And so we're really trying to help them get ahead and staff appropriately. And so this email is really something like, hey, we are hoping to be able to use the CDOT right of way. We're going to be applying for a standard permit in CDOT Region 5. Would be sufficient. That's just to let them know that something is going to be coming. And then they will know, and they'll talk a little bit more about this next week, but then they'll be able to set up some conversations with you around what the scope of work looks like, what kind of documentation. They're working really hard to try and expedite broadband projects. And so they've really done a lot of work on it. And this initial email, the like, hey, we're coming email, is just the first step in that. And it'll go to Leslie Gaylord, and I think her email is in the onboarding checklist.
It
Yeah,
is.
and
I wish I would have asked that question sooner because I think we went a little overboard with our letter. So
There's no such
thank
thing.
you.
They will appreciate it. I'm sure they will
well,
appreciate it.
Laura, I'm glad you asked it anyway, because the direction I was giving folks was going to leave you stranded there. It sounds like a simple email, like Allie was describing. I'm looking at the CDOT right-of-way access section in the onboarding, and it's truly just an email to Leslie starting the communication that you have a project and how you plan to move forward with that project. Is it standard permit, or is it intent to request an unsolicited proposal?
Perfect. Thank you both.
Yeah. And Kate, to your question, that would be a yes on an email communication to CDOT by the time frame. If Monday you're not able to do it by Monday, let us know. We have some flexibility. We're just trying to get all these things in and lined up so that we can hit the ground uh, soon after our March date.
And an additional piece of clarification here, y'all. We don't need you to have a response from
No,
CDOT. Really, it's just us making sure that our grantees or provisional grantees are letting CDOT know so that they're able to start getting ready. So
yeah, I don't know how Allie feels about this, but whenever we get on with CDOT on our normal calls, I don't want them telling me that I have a rush on a permit that they didn't know anything about. I mean, I'd like to have that a little bit better conversation of how we can help you, not how we can push things for you against us. Any other questions? Well, okay. Craig, you got your hand up?
Do you have
And
an update on NEPA consulting help and registering for that?
yeah, Allie, do you have an update for that? I don't.
So it kind of depends on what you're asking for here. NEPA consulting, so your EHP consulting should have been included in your original bid price. So the NTIA will not allow us to do NEPA reviews on your behalf. So what will happen again, just sort of to restate, you all will do your initial NEPA review. Your environmental consultant will, and specifically your historic preservation consultants, will determine whether or not you're eligible for any categorical exclusions. They will send that to us. Our NEPA consultant will then kind of go back and forth with you to figure out whether or not there's anything we can, any ways that we can help you streamline the process. And then we will submit. If if there needs to be a revision, y'all will revise, send it back to us, and we'll submit on your behalf. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Craig, but I think what you're really getting at is that is something that is a requirement as part of the grant, not something that the state of Colorado provides technical assistance for.
Yeah, I think also, Ally, there may be some communication that me personally, may have indicated that there was going to be a technical assistance program around NEPA, and that's not the case, right?
There's not a technical assistance program in terms of of uh, us paying for a NEPA consultant
Okay.
to work through a NEPA project area. But if you've got consultants you're even thinking about working with, I encourage them to join 2 weeks from now and 3 weeks from now. I think it's like the 5th and the 12th or something like that. Because the NTIA has done so much work. I mean, I think this is one of the areas where NTIA has really shined in terms of trying to make these NEPA approvals as easy as possible by really codifying these categorical exclusions. And our consultants will effectively be training the people that y'all will be working with. That is part of sort of a technical assistance program, if you will. But I don't think it's exactly what you're asking about, Craig, in the same way. But we will talk about categorical exclusions. We'll talk about, the ways that NTIA is trying to help, and then what our teams can help your teams with. We'll get our people to talk to your people.
Thanks for the clarification, Allison. That clears up some things that I think I have been misunderstood on or misunderstanding on. Kate, you've had your hand up for a little while. You're probably tired now.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. I know Kristen said she was going to get back to me, but I don't think she had answered yet. Do you know when you're going to send out the agreements for the mini grant? I know it's not, but just.
Hi, Kate. This is Kristen. I sent you a direct chat. Apparently that didn't work. My understanding is it'll be early next week.
Okay, great. And then I was looking at the updated table that you have for the network attributes. I'm being asked by our engineers, is this going to be the final update to this table?
It should have been the final update a week and a half ago, Kate. So yes, this is the final. How does Allie and Megan say pencils down? There's no more pencils coming in on this.
Sure hope so. That's right.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I just had a question in your attributes table, row 90, under the node attributes for hybrid and hybrid fiber. You have total fiber miles, and it says total miles associated with this node. Is that existing plus the proposed or just the existing?
Just the existing, if I remember correctly. Yeah, let me take a look at it real quick just to make sure. You said 90 total fiber miles?
Yeah.
Yes, this is the existing fiber.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
David had a question here. Are we going to be able to send our NEPA plans to the consultants to provide feedback prior to the contract signing? Or is that the first day we'd be able to reach out? I'm assuming the first day, meaning after you have an agreement that's been executed, David. Okay.
That's a great question, David. I don't know that we don't have a restriction necessarily on when you could send it to them. So, if you guys feel like you're in a place, let me take it back to the team and talk about it, and we'll put it out in a fax. But I don't know, Michael. My initial instinct is our NEPA contracts are already working, so I don't see any reason why we couldn't review that for you in advance. So.
Okay. Yeah, he added, Allie, that thanks. He said that they're almost ready and would like to send it for feedback as soon as they could.
I actually think, frankly, our consultants would really appreciate seeing it because it's we're creating our process right now. It might be real helpful for us
Okay.
if you're willing to be a guinea pig.
Yep. All right. Well, anything else from anyone? All right. Well, appreciate everyone's questions today and appreciate your time with us. Hopefully, this time has been spent well, and we look forward to further sessions and ideas for sessions. We've had a few come in, and we're taking those back and getting them teed up. So keep them coming. And you guys have a great week, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.